if you think back a few years and everybody was trying to define what big data meant and talking about it in terms of words that began with V, and we took a slightly different tack on that. Like, yes, the volumes of data were growing and the velocity of data and the variety of data, but actually what we thought was a bit more interesting was not the nature of the data, but actually what organizations, enterprises were trying to do with that data and how they were trying to engage with that data. And so therefore we looked at a number of slightly different things in terms of totality, the storing and processing of all the data, or as much as was sort of economically viable, in terms of exploration. So, schema-free approaches to analyzing data to identify new patterns rather than just asking, all the same old questions that you knew you wanted to ask when you modeled your data warehouse, for example. And then also about frequency. So this is sort of, the other side of the coin from velocity, if you like, where we saw that what was happening was that organizations wanted to do much more frequent analysis of their data to enable real-time decision-making. And I think it's this aspect that really sort of, almost with hindsight, perhaps was actually the most important in terms of changing the way in which organizations were engaging with their data. As I said, sort of the pressure that would put on the compute layer in order to enable organizations to process those larger volumes of data. And we talk about this in terms of sort of systems of engagement, systems of analysis, and I thought, perhaps the easiest way to understand this is to think about it from a user example. So if you think about, in a retail environment, customer service, that customer service has traditionally been driven by systems of engagement that have been very much people-led. You go into a retail store, you go up to a person, and perhaps you ask them for advice or recommendations, or to point you in the direction of the products that you're looking for. And even obviously, if you're actually paying with cash, if some people still do that, that actually the transaction itself is a physical transaction. It's not until that transaction is entered into the systems of record that it actually becomes computerized. And so what we see is then obviously, once it's in that systems of record, it goes into financial ERP, CRM applications, and then you have, an ETL process to make that data available in, what we refer to here as systems of analysis, typically a data warehouse, and then from there, obviously your staff can have access to that data for business intelligence purposes. Typically, historically we've seen that IT professionals creating dashboards and pre-formatted reports for data analysts and decision makers. Now, there's been a number of changes in this picture, on a rapid pace in the last couple of years. One of those is, if you think about those systems of analysis, is that the analytics capability has been pushed down to the data in many cases, and also it's expanded in terms of the sort of users that you have that have access to the data and the workloads that they're deploying against it. So not just data analysts and decision makers, but also data scientists and also more ordinary business users or even consumers themselves, as we're going to see. And what we've also then seen on the systems of engagement side is obviously a rapid change away from people-led engagement towards automated engagement. And so we're seeing that software is being increasingly used to replace the role played by the employee. Obviously in an e-commerce environment, but also actually in a bricks and mortar environment. So chatbots and digital assistants are answering questions and making suggestions, while potential purchase and personalized offers are being recommended based on previous transactions. And this is happening, increasingly you see people actually, in a store, either using their own devices or devices that are provided by a retail store to enable this all to happen, interactively or online. For those interfaces between the enterprise and the customer to, those applications, digital assistants and chatbots to work in real time, they have to be driven by intelligence. And that's where we've seen the emergence of, what we talk about systems of intelligence. So things like rules engines, decisioning systems, recommendation engines, natural language processing, other forms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. And it's these systems of intelligence that actually enable the enterprise to engage intelligently through with the customer through those operational applications and other systems of engagement. So those, in order to probably those systems of intelligence and systems of engagement have to operate in real time. It's not enough to generate sort of reports and dashboards for business intelligence as traditionally been done, through which humans make data-driven decisions. There has to be automated at the speed of business. So really, you can think about this being sort of divided up. Obviously, the lines are blurred, but from a generalization, just to generalize, you can divide this up into two worlds: sort of the world of the static data, which can largely be handled by traditional, relational databases and existing applications, and then the world of the active data. And this is where we see new applications, being developed. To deliver on the performance requirements, and those performance requirements are really encouraging organizations to think differently about their data processing capability. And one of the options, obviously there are more, but we're focusing today on GPU databases and the role they play in this. One of those options is obviously the emergence of GPU databases to drive that active data and that real time in this case, in this example, that real time engagement.
So in the context of what Matt talked about, where does Kinetica fit in, right? So you have the systems of engagement, you have the systems of record at the bottom, and then on the right you see the systems of analysis and intelligence. Kinetica actually covers both the system of analysis and intelligence, because not only can it support the more traditional static data use cases like accelerating your analytics, but also for active data, which is streaming data that you can run machine learning modules on or deep learning modules on top of that. So this is kind of where it fits into the ecosystem that Matt talked about.